Hello and welcome to another episode of the SumerSports Show. I'm Parker Fleming here this afternoon with my colleague and friend Tej Seth across from me and our good friend Matthew Coller of Purple Insider and other places. Matthew, we're excited to have you here. We're all here at Circa doing a little radio row kicking off the season. The Survivor contest is going on. It's really nice. I have to ask, being here, were you guys as taken aback by the heat as I was?
No, because when I left Minnesota, it was 98 degrees with like 90% humidity, which is actually worse than this. So, yes, it was gnarly. And I was covering a practice outside. And I left with a white shirt and I came back with a black shirt because it was just entirely cut. Well, dark white.
You should see a doctor. You should see a doctor.
You know what I mean? It was I was just entirely covered with sweat. Okay, it was a different color.
Happens to the best of us. Tej, were you okay with the heat?
Yeah, I mean, I like the heat. You know, being in the Midwest, as you know, Matt, is such a grind in the winter during football season. That's like why people in like California always get made fun of for not watching football, but like we watch so much of it because like we have nothing to do in the winter. Like we don't go outside. So I do really like going outside in the heat here, but you're right, it is hot. Hopefully we can spend some time at Stadium Swim though on Friday and Saturday here enjoying the beach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I just get all the time when I do like radio hits and stuff because people bring me on, do their NFL previews, and I'll hear like, so it must be cold up there in Minnesota. How you guys? I'm like, what? It gets in the upper 90s regularly. We are in the Midwest, man. It's not this isn't Antarctica. It's not a frozen tundra all the time.
Yeah, that's me. I live in Antarctica, so it's very cold this morning going to the airport. But enough about the weather. It's always fun to talk about, and you get the heat walking in here out of the airport. But Matthew, we're excited to talk to you here and talk a little bit about the NFC North. I think is where we kind of want to start. You're the Vikings guy, and by extension, the NFC North guy. We have some odds at Sumer, so I want to throw these at you. And then, as we all wave to Eric Eager walking in the background there, we have some odds about playoffs that I think are really interesting. The Lions are leading 51.3% probability to make the playoff. The Packers just behind at 42%. Vikings are 39.9. Bears are 30.7. Maybe an interesting division just because at least all four teams have a viable path to making the playoffs, to winning the division. In your memory, does that feel like a kind of a new thing for what has been a top-heavy NFC North?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, because when you go back historically, the Green Bay Packers have dominated the division so much. And then when they have a down year, one of these other teams is like, okay, this is our big chance, our once per decade, because Favre had a down year, whatever year in the 90s, or Aaron Rodgers, 2018, had a down year. So the Bears pop up. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt 2017. The Vikings pop up. But for the most part, it's just been owned by those quarterbacks. And now everyone, no matter whether you are Tej's age or my age, I mean, you'd have to be like in your 50s to remember when the Packers were bad and when you didn't go into a season assuming that they were going to be the team to beat in the division. So now it's like this weight off of everybody's shoulders, but there's also probably some anxiousness from everybody's fan base of like, don't tell us Jordan Love is going to be this again, right? Like, I'm sure that everyone is feeling that way in the division, but somebody asked me on my show that I do every night, could every team in this division finish 9-8? I was like, no, that couldn't possibly. So I went back through every division over the last, 20 years. And it did happen once where there were 3 8-8s and a 7-9. I was like, that's us. That's this year. That's the division. That's what's going to happen. And so I think that as you even look at your odds there, 9.5 to 7.5 is the gap. It's like even most people's odds kind of feel like it's going to be that way. But I think that that's all of us kind of projecting a lot of scenarios that are good for everyone, not necessarily great for the Packers, but like good for the Lions to get to that point. And we don't so much look at what's the catastrophe, because there are catastrophes built in. Yeah. The Bears, we know what that catastrophe is. Justin Fields still gets sacked every play.
Right.
We know what the Packers catastrophe is. That's if Jordan Love is just bad. And with the Vikings, I think that's very fair. But also the Lions still play in Detroit and still are the Lions. Sorry, Tej. And you never really know there. But asking them to take as big of a step forward as we're asking them, is that really realistic? Or are really what they were last year, is that who they're going to be? And we've just sort of filled in the rest by saying usually a team, when it feels like it's on the rise, takes a next step. But it's similar to prospects sometimes, where we just Baker Mayfield wins 11 games and we go, oh, next year, 14 games for Baker Mayfield, franchise quarterback. I wonder if we've done that a little too much to the Lions, and there is a calamity scenario built in there. If Amon-Ra St. Brown gets hurt, or if the offense just is not the same and people figure it out and the defense is similar, that they could be a 7-win team, and we'll all go, man, we all thought they were going to be so great. But that's like the whole Lions history is going into seasons where we go, yeah, they could actually be really great this year, and then they're not. So it is, at least it looks in the projections like it's clustered, but I think at the end of the day, somebody will have 11 and somebody will have 5. We just are not really sure who it is.
No, I really like how you laid that out. And I think like when you look at it from the Lions versus the field, the Lions break-even probability to win the division is 40%. So the field has the advantage there. But if you had to pick any team to win the division, most people are picking the Lions right now because there's so much uncertainty with the Packers offense. The Vikings defense also has the same uncertainty with we haven't seen the proof of concept yet. And then the Bears are still trying to figure something out. But I'm really curious to hear your answer to this is if you were to pick one of these 4 teams for the next 5 years in the NFC North, which future are you buying into the most? Because I could see a case being made for the Lions, a lot of young talent. The roster has come along. They're the favorites to win the division. I could see a case for the Vikings. Like the offensive supporting cast is really good. And we know that they're going to move on from Kirk Cousins eventually in this time frame. And they also have young pieces on defense. And then you have the Bears with Justin Fields and the Packers with so much youth on offense with Jordan Love, Christian Watson, and Musgrave and Dobbs. So which of these futures are you buying into the most in the NFC North?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because there's so much lack of clarity with Jordan Love and with Justin Fields. And about the other two, what can the ceiling be this year? What can the ceiling be in the future? Because so if we just go through them and sort of make their case for and against, how long you guys got? Like 3-4 hours? Just break all this down quickly. But the
Gotta be home on Sunday morning.
the Justin Fields thing. The worst case scenario to me is that they go like 8-9 and he's just okay, and we still don't really know what they're supposed to do there. And I think that what happened with Daniel Jones and the Giants was the worst possible thing you could have happen as a franchise when the guy is really not that great, but he has a good enough season where if you don't pay him, everyone's going to think you're a psychopath. And so you kind of like have to pay him, even though absolutely none of us thinks that Daniel Jones will ever win a Super Bowl. And they could end up, Chicago could end up there. But I also think with Fields, the upside seems so much and the downside we've already seen. Either one of those scenarios put them in a position to potentially compete for a Super Bowl. So I think I would pick Chicago because of that. The cap space is a massive factor that they could continue to load up that roster on defense where maybe I'll have heard of a couple of the players by next year. And if Fields does take this massive step that everyone wants him to take, then you're talking about a very legitimate team that has that sort of rags to riches, bottom you tank, and then you shoot up to the top. But
do you think they have the highest or the longest tail in terms of the highest upside of any team in the NFC North?
Yeah. I mean, I do because if they lose a lot, then they're going to pick another quarterback, and they've already got all that cap space, and they could just spend like insane people and keep building up that roster. Right. Plus, they've been drafting and they've been developing, and they've had one thing that we never think about is they've been able to give a lot of unproven players opportunity because they're not playing a bunch of veterans trying to win. Yeah. So you can find out who you've got. You can develop players and have them ready to step into roles after 3 years. Whereas if you're a team, and I saw this in Minnesota a lot, if you're a team that's playing Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith and Jordan Hicks and Eric Hendricks like they were last year, you're not really giving guys opportunities to develop outside of training camp and preseason or if someone gets hurt. So Brian Asamoah comes into this year with 100 snaps and you still have no idea if he can play or not. Yeah. So I think that there's like a little tiny value in that, but really we all know it's going to come down to the quarterback situation. And there is at least enough of a chance that he could either be great or terrible that you have to pick them to have that best chance. I think with Green Bay, if Love doesn't work out, they have a long way to go to get where they need to go, even if they draft another quarterback. And they probably won't be so bad that they'll win 3 games or something, right? But if there's a case for the Vikings, it's that they have the pieces in place that you need to win a Super Bowl in the biggest positions in being left tackle and wide receiver on offense. there's just no like understating what Justin Jefferson dodoes for a franchise. And I look at rosters that win the Super Bowl, and this is going to be a real hot take for you guys. They usually have Hall of Fame players, like, right?
I need to see some numbers on that.
I know. Go to halloffame.com. I bet they've got like your analytics there. But if you're going to win as the Rams, you got to have Aaron Donald. You got to have Cooper Kupp. You got to have these all-pro superstar players.
Mm-hmm.
And the Vikings have those in place on the offensive side.
Yeah.
And so if you get the right quarterback, I know everyone goes, hey, Alex Smith to Mahomes, as if like that's an easy thing to do. But they are in a position to place someone into a spot where you can have such great players at those positions that the hard part is almost done. It's just finding that piece and then building around the defense with the money you get in the salary cap.
And having the experienced quarterback relative to, like you mentioned, to Daniel Jones there, it's not to sound too Rumsfeldian, but we have known knowns and we have known unknowns. And you have Kirk. Okay, I've got a known known. Like, I know what I've got here, and I know what I need to do to build around him. That actually is kind of freeing. There's not as much pressure to say, hey, I have to go hit on this next quarterback, and there's going to be high uncertainty on that. I can build the team around what we have right now and say, hey, we've got a couple-year window to maybe maximize here. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, certainly if I want to go, 10 years in the future, 5 years in the future, I don't know that Kirk is my franchise quarterback, but for what he is right now, there's just so much upside and so much certainty that it really frees you up to kind of design a team around him.
Well, and I think that not giving him a contract extension is also very important too, because it gives you another year this year to decide if you think like you can win a Super Bowl with him, which I think that's already decided. But this is only Kevin O'Connell's second year with him.
Yeah.
That if they are a top 5 offense, and then you could start to work around that. But I think that they're done with Cousins for the future. I think that this is kind of the last shot that they have. And then they're going to draft someone else. And when you've already got those pieces in place to draft someone else, it makes life so much easier.
Right.
I think it increases the rate that you could have a Carson Wentz turn into somebody who's great, or a Jared Goff. You don't need a Mahomes to compete for a Super Bowl. And that's the position that the Vikings are in.
Or we've seen with the 49ers, you also minimize your risk if it doesn't pan out.
Right.
Yes. And so I think it's kind of like a nice reinforcement learning cycle of like, hey, we've got the quarterback so we can build around him. So when we need the next quarterback, they're coming into a nice landing spot.
Right. And with Detroit, and you can speak to the stage. This is my opinion. You follow them closer than I do. I think it's like this year, next year, maybe the year after. That's your window. And if you blow it, then I'm not sure what happens after that. They have built up to this point. They are at their peak of a chance for a couple years. They're where the Vikings were in 2017, 2018, 2019. And now it's all, do you get the right matchups in the playoffs and so forth? But they are the ready to win. So I forget exactly how the question was framed, but it was like the next 5 years. It's like, well, the Lions could do it now. The Packers, I just can't see it. The Vikings could do it in a couple of years if it's the right guy. And the Bears could put themselves in a 5-year plan that would be amazing. Do we kind of agree with that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you in that sense. I think like the interesting thing for the Lions is there's more pressure for me on this season in particular, because I think this is the last year you're going to get of Ben Johnson as your play caller. And I think Ben Johnson is arguably the best play caller that's not a head coach in the NFL right now. So the Lions are working with a scenario where they have a head coach that's proven to build a pretty good culture. We, are still iffy about his game management, and we're still figuring out that type of stuff. But the culture has gotten better since Matt Patricia, which was not hard to do, but he did do that. And then you have Ben Johnson, who uses personnel diversity to his advantage, was able to scheme up the offense well in games where St. Brown missed last year, is someone you can trust to integrate Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta into the offense. So that's why I think that there's more pressure on the Lions taking advantage of a division that's all in kind of a transition period this year, with the Vikings retooling, doing a competitive rebuild, and the Bears still figuring out their defense and the Packers figuring out their offense. That's like where the opportunity arises for the Lions this year and next year, where they can hopefully take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Matthew, we've taken so much of your time. I want to make sure that you give an opportunity here to promote your book. Let's show it on camera. Football is a number. I had to look which way we were going. Football is a numbers game, and very, very interesting. It's on my list. It's in my Amazon shopping cart. I'm excited to get to it.
Thank you.
The story of PFF, but I've heard nothing but great things about it. So what was kind of your impetus for, hey, I need to write a book about this?
Well, someone told me I need to tell the Tage Steph story. So they said there's an intern here who's going to be the next NFL GM, the first GM from Michigan who makes the Super Bowl, probably, right? That's anyway. So so around 2021, I would say after the 2020 season, somewhere in the summer of 2021, I was thinking about the analytics revolution in football. And I felt like we were starting to see the evidence of it actually coming together.
Yeah.
And that's not just, hey, teams don't punt as much anymore, but I mean the way organizations operate. Right. And I don't write about like health or mental health or whatever, but there's like a lot of ways that are obvious that you can sort of point to as like the sports science and the way the teams operate, even from their internal systems and things like that. And they're always looking for new answers. And it just sort of caught my eye that I felt like we went from the dark ages to the new age very fast in football. And so I thought, well, who's behind this, right? And the answer isn't entirely Pro Football Focus, but I think they've been at the center of everything that has happened in the analytics revolution. And of course, we have tracking data that has just been dropped on us within the last few years. We have the big data bowl that's happening that Tage was a part of. That I mean, I don't think people realize that there's this event where the whole NFL shows up to hear nerds like him break down, the tracking data. But there is at the NFL Combine. So I thought, I've known a lot of people like Eric Eager through the industry for a long time. I was like, how can I say something about this that's different? And I had also been aware of Neil Hornsby and who he is, which he is the Billy Bean of this book. He is the one that started Pro Football Focus, and no one knows about him because he's not out there. He's not a self-promoter. He's not on Twitter. He's on Twitter, but he doesn't tweet. He's not like
post weightlifting videos.
Yeah,
I think,
yes,
right?
he does. Yeah,
my man.
He's not giving like symposiums and things like that. He doesn't like. There's some analytics people who have really been out there in the media, and he's not one of them. So I want to tell his story, but also how PFF is impacting the NFL on a daily basis. So you'll see every day someone on Twitter going, those PFF grades, who cares? You're like, I want to explain to people how this actually works, how the grades get there, and how the teams actually use them. And I had a chance to have Kwesi Adofo-Mensah interviewed for this book as well. And he was very open, as you know, because he shares a chapter with you in the book, Tage, that's actually not a joke. That's a real thing. Yeah. He does actually share a chapter with Tage. But for him to explain how he ended up getting on the path to be the general manager of the Vikings by using PFF data to do studies and present them to the 49ers front office is really profound to me, of the impact that PFF has had. And I tried to cover many of the tentacles. So that was what kind of inspired me initially, was just, I'm really noticing this analytics driven approach. Yeah. And then from there, I just uncovered so many things that I had no idea were going on, and a very fascinating story of a company that's run by Chris Collinsworth as well, and a lot of great personal stories, including Tage's as a guy who, would not have been, and I'm sorry I called you short in the book. I meant just, you're not imposing.
Short relative to you and Eric when we're all standing together, yes.
or football people.
or next to football people,
But
yes.
I think someone like Tage could be in an NFL front office today. Yeah. And that was not the case even probably 10 years ago for someone doing it through their abilities with data. And that is fascinating to me. So I'm glad that we could talk about it a little, because I'm so excited. It's coming out October 3rd, but pre-sale is going on now, so people can get it at Amazon.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you putting me in the book. That was really nice to see my chapter shared with Kwesi was super cool. And then I think the parts that I've read so far, your writing style is really good, and it does have a lot of Moneyball vibes, in a sense where, like you mentioned, Neil Hornsby is similar to Billy Bean in this story, where not a lot of people knew about him, but you can't tell the story of the last 10-15 years of football without mentioning Neil and what PFF has done. And you bring up the grades being iffy and people complaining about them, but everyone I know that works for a team or works in a football adjacent company, whether they're preparing something for a broadcast, uses PFF data daily in preparing advanced scouting reports or things that you end up seeing on NBC and Thursday night football broadcasts. And I think that's what's really important, is mentioning that in this book. And I've really enjoyed reading it so far.
I can give you guys an example if you got time.
Yeah,
you guys
please.
busy? You got things to do? Okay. All right. Well, just an example. So Paul Alexander is a legendary offensive line coach. Yeah. And we're talking one of the best offensive line coaches in history. And when he got his hands on PFF data, the way that he used it, he didn't just look at the grades and be like, oh, well, I don't need to coach anymore. Well, he knows offensive line play better than almost anyone on earth. But the way he used it was he looked for the negative plays that were graded by PFF. And he found that they were very accurate to what he would grade negative plays. So he used it to go find the tape of those negative plays and study them for his players. So it's not just like the NFL is looking at the grades and going like, oh yeah, this is a scouting report. No, they're pairing it. And that was how he paired it. So when he sat down with an offensive lineman, he already had all the negative plays.
Right.
So he could go through and say, here's what we need to work on. Here's how it enhances his coaching. And then when PFF connected it with the film in their PFF Ultimate system, it took over every NFL building. And if you ask coaches about how they use Ultimate, they get very excited. And I think this is another thing that, I mean, PFF, when they're putting it out on Twitter or their opinions or podcasts or whatever, I mean, it's not really presenting that business side where they're working with teams. And so everyone knows they work with teams, but not how. And I tried to go as deep as I could on revealing how.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And very, very excited to read it. Matthew Coller, thanks for your time. Always enjoyed talking to you. Make sure people follow you on Twitter for Vikings and NFL stuff, just at Matthew Coller. And can find him there. And his book is available for pre-sale on Amazon. Thanks, Matt. Great talking to you.
Yeah, let me say real quick before we shut off. I listen to this show all the time. This is my jogging show, the SumerSports Show. And I made the intro music, and I feel that I want that credit.
We talked about saying that before, and I didn't say it out loud. I should have put that on your tag. That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
Intro music maker.
So I get excited every time I hear the
Do you run faster when it's me versus Thomas and Eric?
I
I just feel like the pace of my voice probably drives you a little bit.
I was going to say, all of you guys are a little bit of fast talkers, except for Tage probably. But Eric's intensity is
it's a great jogging show.
No, but I want to say that like you guys are doing amazing stuff, and every show makes me smarter. So, I mean, I guess people are already listening to this, but I just wanted to compliment you that I feel like as a person who's constantly studying a team in the NFL, I understand football better because of things like this. So thank you guys for doing it.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. Great talking to you. Great having you.